candle. This morning's New Testament reading is from Matthew. Straight penny here. It's from Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 through 12. It is the story of Jesus and the teaching and healing that goes on. When Jesus got word that John had been arrested, he returned to Galilee, and he moved from his hometown. Nice if I started in the right place. My mistake. Let's try this again. Nope, I like that one better anyway. Let's stay there. Sorry. So when Jesus got word that John had been arrested, he returned to Galilee. He moved from his hometown Nazareth to the lakeside village of Capernaum, nestled at the base of Zebulun and the Naphtali hills. This move completed Isaiah's sermon. Land of Zebulun, land of Naphtali, road to the sea over Jordan, Galilee crossroads for the nations. People sitting out their lives in the dark, and they saw a huge light. Sitting in the dark, dark country of death, they watched the sun come up. This Isaiah had prophesied in sermon, and it came to life in Galilee the moment Jesus started preaching, because he picked up where John left off. Change your life. God's kingdom is here. And walking along the beach of Lake Galilee, Jesus saw two brothers, Simon and Andrew, and they were fishing and throwing their nets into the lake. It was their regular work, Jesus said to them. Come with me, I'll make a new kind of fisherman out of you. I'll show you how to catch men and women instead of perch and bass. And they didn't ask questions, but they simply dropped their nets and they followed. And a short distance down the beach, they came upon another pair of brothers, James and John, Zebedee's sons. These two were sitting in a boat with their father, mending their fish nets, and Jesus made the same offer to them, and they were quick to follow and join his teachings. May we bless that word to our hearts and to our minds. Amen. Amen. Let us pray. Good morning, Lord. We look to you as our visionary leader to help us make sense of what we see occurring around us. Help us to be the vessels of your dreams for humankind, and in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. This community of God says, Amen. Dream God's dream. What does that mean to you? When we talk about dreams, we could talk about what we dreamed last night. I was walking down a dark road and suddenly, but I don't think that's what God is talking about. I don't think that's what we're talking about when we talk about God's dream for humankind. It isn't a dream that only lasts one night. It's a dream that has lasted for days and for months and for years. It is of a much greater magnitude than the dreams that we dream. However, we are part of that dream. You know, God's dreams are large and they're long-term. Dreams that we will one day realize that we are divinely created, that we are equal, and that we are all inspired. Dreams that someday we will learn to talk to each other, to learn from each other, to cry with each other, to uphold one another, to work together. Care for all of God's creations together, including all of God's creations and dreams and visions in all discussions, in all actions. And yet, sometimes we are the flaw in that design. But maybe that flaw was intended. Because it pulls out of us that courage to continue to be the dream makers, to continue to be the creators. You know, if you think about the Bible, there were a lot of inspiring actions and stories. 40 years in the desert, the building of a first temple, watching it destroy the building of a second temple. A woman who broke with tradition and talked with Jesus at the well. A man and a group of men who lowered the paralytic through the roof for the healing of Jesus to take place. It takes courage to put a hole in someone's roof. The people who massed against Jesus. And the people who massed with Jesus. The people who cheered his arrival on Palm Sunday against the orders of the Roman army. And the fishermen who walked away from their nets, their careers, and their family to follow Jesus. And the women who supported Jesus financially and spiritually, like Pauline. So much upheaval, so much violence, so much mistreatment, and yet we find a religion that professes love and justice and peace and inclusivity. I believe in my heart that those who assembled the many writings into the book we now call the Bible wanted to ensure that we realize that their lives had not been easy. Rebellion, fighting for inclusion, peace, the rights of everyone, that's not a one-time battle. It's a battle that has raged for thousands of years and will continue to rage. Why? It doesn't seem that hard to include everybody. But when we do, it conflicts with our basic Maslowian, like that word, I liked it, Maslowian fundamental drive that says we have to have what we need to survive. And that fear that someone else might take our food, our shelter, or our comfort, and we won't be able to meet our basic needs is very difficult for us to overcome. When I'm feeling overwhelmed, I have a tendency to walk into my bedroom, which is, I think I probably described it before, it's just bookshelves. It's my library. And I often pull this book off the shelf. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's called The Origins of the Urban Crisis, Race and Inequality in Post-War Detroit. It's a story of how Detroit got where Detroit got, from the 30s to the 70s and 80s, kind of. A time when the actions were designed to segregate, to colonize, to be unfair. And it isn't ancient history at all. And especially during the 1950s when Mayor Cobo reigned supreme, a Republican elected without the support of the black voters in Detroit. A time when many actions were taken, along with the actions of the accumulated behaviors of the 30s and 40s, and they created that smoldering powder keg in Detroit that would erupt in the 60s into the riots. Hear this little bit about the construction of I-75. Black residents of the expressway construction areas often pointed to the folly of the highway plans, but few government officials took their complaints seriously. They had little political power in a majority white city. Poor residents of center city neighborhoods and mainly renters had to fend for themselves. When relocated by highway construction because the State Highway Commission had no legal obligation to assist those households, those that had lived along the proposed freeway routes worried about the difficulty of finding rental housing in other parts of the city. Harvey Royal, who lived along the route of the future Edsel Ford Freeway, wrote, "I think I would have been so much nicer to have built places for people to live in than a highway, and just put people in the street." Maud Kane, a widow who lived in a one-room apartment behind a storefront on Hastings Street, expressed her desperation about finding an affordable apartment when she was relocated for highway construction I do not have money to rent a $75 house with no heat. Mayor Cobo, the city's most ardent supporter of the new expressway system, discounted the hardship wrought by the construction. Yeah, sure, there's been some inconvenience in building our expressways and in our slum clearance programs, but in the long run, more people will benefit. That's the price of progress. Let it be known, Mayor Cobo not only put I-75 through the black neighborhoods, but through the Polish neighborhoods and the Irish neighborhoods and the Jewish neighborhoods, because he didn't like them either. He used his political power to destroy communities, but it would all be for the better in the long run. Under the guise of leading in a model of efficiency, he settled grievances with many community groups that had irritated him. And in the 60s, we reaped the results of that. By the 70s, Detroit was a wasteland, an urban wasteland. So what? What if Mayor Cobo and those that had preceded him had built a city on justice and peace and inclusivity? Maybe Detroit would have been a more international city, enjoying the richness of many perspectives and abilities and skills. Seems rather courageous to dream about that now. And yet, some of that's happening. But on the other side, we're seeing some gentrification in neighborhoods where old ways of life in communities are again being damaged by the new building. It's a give and a take. But if it's done thoughtfully, and done carefully, and done inclusively, the hope would be that there would be success. Courage to dream. Courage to try to make that dream a reality. Courage to try and dream God's dream and make it so. Daniel was given a vision of great war, and he was afraid that if he went into this war, he would not come out alive. And so he asked for assistance. He asked for someone to explain to him, how does going into war fit into your teachings? And because he believed in God's dream, he believed in this vision, he asked, was brave enough and courageous enough to ask for assistance. An angelic figure arrived with information and a vision from God. And in Daniel 10 and verses 18 through 19, we hear this. And then this human-like figure touched me again and gave me strength. Don't be afraid, my friend, because peace will come. Everything is going to be all right. Take courage and be strong. You see, it is always part of our calling to try to understand God's dream, not our dream. The two may be complementary, but God has infinite vision, and God calls us to be strong and courageous, to make sure our passion shows the passion that God planted in each one of us to do our part of moving God's vision forward. So we need to keep marching, we need to keep talking, we need to keep petitioning city councils, we need to keep up with our legislative bodies, we need to make our voices heard. We need to ensure that someone is keeping God's dream alive. You know, it takes courage and dedication and energy to keep moving this forward. And lots of days we just want to stop and say, I've done my part, I'm tired. And then we watch what is happening around us, and that passion rears up again because we've heard that message. It's okay to rest, but don't ever stop pushing forward. Continue to lead and make people hear your passion. And as the Apostle Paul shared with the Corinthians, keep your eyes open, hold tight to your convictions, give it all you've got. Be resolute and love without stopping. Hold tight, be resolute, love without stopping. Since 1963, we've seen a bit of change. Probably not all that you hoped for, but we didn't stand still and we didn't completely regress. We continue to move things forward, and that is God's dream. God's dream is that we'll be courageous, that we'll be passionate, that we will love without exception, that we will work tirelessly. Jesus didn't stop working. Jesus didn't stop pushing. He kept listening and communicating with his fellow people and with God. He kept teaching. He didn't stop pushing even when he knew what was going to happen when he rode into that city. Jesus continued to pray and to talk with God. He continued to eat with everyone. He continued to teach everyone. Jesus continued to love and encourage everyone that he came in contact with, for he knew God's dream. He knew what God's dream was, and he stayed the course. And he would say that to each and every one of you. Stay the course, continue your work. Summon up the courage that you have. Continue to build on that dream of love and inclusion and justice. And when we hear the story of David calling to Solomon to rebuild that temple, you, my friends, are called to build a temple. Not a typical temple, for in our case, the world is our temple. And we are called to build that sacred house of God in this world for all of God's people, not within a denomination, not within a sexual orientation, not within anything else, not within legal status, not within, you name it, you fill in the blank. We are called to build God's temple within the community without judgment. It's God's dream. And you are called to continue that building. To continue to summon your courage, to continue that forward momentum, and help the world dream. Help the world dream God's dream of inclusion, God's dream of justice, God's dream of love. You are divinely created people, working, laughing, and crying together, but together for each other, in love and inclusion and in justice. Amen.